So I want you to take a breath right now. Seriously, just take a second and notice the breath you are taking right in this exact moment.
Mm-hmm.
Notice how deep it is, or, maybe how shallow. And now ask yourself a question. Are you breathing that way because your body actually wants to? Or because you're like unconsciously holding your stomach in?
Right. Or maybe you're subtly anticipating a stressful email.
Exactly. Or just matching the frantic pace of whatever room you're sitting in. Today, we are opening with a surprisingly intimate question, and that is, does your body actually belong to you?
It's a huge question.
Right, and I don't mean that in some legal sense or an abstract philosophical way. I mean,
Yeah.
right now, in real time, as you are listening to this deep dive, are you the primary author of your physical experience?
Yeah. Or is your body more like a territory? A territory that's constantly managed and governed by forces you didn't even choose.
It's such a wild thing to think about.
It is an incredibly profound question to sit with. It really goes right to the heart of how we experience simply being alive. Because, we walk around assuming that just because we are physically located inside our bodies, we're automatically the ones in charge of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. We're in here, so we must be driving the car.
Exactly. But when you look at the mechanics of how we actually process our own physical sensations, the reality is, well, it's often much more complicated.
Okay, let's unpack this, because what I absolutely love about the text we're diving into today is how it completely flips on that generic, slightly annoying advice we always hear. That whole just listen to your body thing.
Oh, yeah, the classic wellness cliche.
Right. So the mission of today's deep dive is exploring this concept from the text called somatic autonomy. We are looking at how we systematically lose trust in our own physical sensations, and more importantly, how we can reclaim our bodies.
Not as a self-improvement project either.
Yes, not as a project, but as an actual home. Because it turns out listening isn't the problem at all. The problem is the heavily distorted filter we are listening through.
That's spot on. And to understand how to reclaim the body, we first have to understand how it was colonized in the first place. Because this isn't a sudden event that just, happens in adulthood.
Right, it starts way earlier.
Way earlier, long before we even have the language to describe what's happening to us. It begins in infancy, when the body acts as what the text calls the ultimate site of negotiation.
When I was reading about these earliest negotiations, I kept picturing a child essentially running scientific experiments on the adults around them.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Right, because an infant has no explicit rules, they have no vocabulary, but they are constantly testing the waters to figure out what the source calls validity, like whose experience actually counts in this dynamic.
Exactly. If a crying child is consistently soothed, they learn a fundamental, nonverbal lesson. They learn that their internal state is legible to the outside world, and that it matters.
Their body signals are valid data.
Yes. But consider the alternative. If that same crying child is frequently ignored or, met with irritation or told to just quiet down because they're bothering people,
Yeah.
they learn a devastatingly different lesson.
That their signals are just an inconvenience.
Right. The baseline assumption becomes that what they feel internally is secondary to the comfort of the people around them.
Wow. So society just starts chipping away at our autonomy right out of the gate. The text calls this the architecture of override. And it's rarely some dramatic, villainous event, is it?
No, not usually.
It's more like a steady drip, drip, drip of small incremental dismissals disguised as common sense, like a parent telling a kid, you aren't actually hungry, you just ate.
Or stop crying doesn't hurt that bad.
Exactly, or you're just being dramatic.
The danger of override is precisely its subtlety. You are having your internal subjective reality repeatedly corrected by an external authority. And over time, that external correction becomes an internal habit.
I was thinking about this, and the analogy that came to mind is it's like a self-surveillance system.
Oh, I like that.
It's like society installed all these security cameras in your mind when you were growing up. You learn all the rules of what is acceptable to feel. And eventually, those external authorities, the parents, teachers, doctors, they get to pack up and go home.
Because you're doing the job for them.
Yes, you have seamlessly become your own security guard. You are sitting there in the control room, cross-examining your own testimony. You feel a wave of fatigue hit you at 2 in the afternoon, and instead of just saying, I'm tired, you immediately think, am I actually tired, or am I just being lazy?
Did I do enough work today to justify being tired?
Exactly.
The most devastating form of override is indeed when it becomes fully internalized. The voice dismissing your body's signal has been so thoroughly absorbed that you mistake it for your own original thought.
That is so insidious.
It really is. You experience the sensation, and your internalized authority immediately puts that sensation on trial. You lose fundamental confidence in your own sensory data.
Oh, wait, let me push back on this premise for a second. Because the text makes a point at saying that these claims on our bodies aren't always malicious, right?
Right. They aren't.
I mean, aren't parents or doctors just trying to care for us? Like a parent tells a toddler not to run into the street because they don't want them to get hit by a car?
Sure.
Or a doctor tells you to finish your entire course of antibiotics even if you intuitively feel better after 3 days. Aren't they just trying to keep us alive and keep society functioning smoothly?
The text absolutely affirms this. We are a social species, which means we are inherently interdependent. Many of these frameworks are born out of genuine attempts at care, or community coherence, or physical safety.
Okay.
The argument here isn't that all external influence is somehow toxic.
But the friction comes from the long-term costs of those rules, right?
Exactly. The tragedy is the cumulative effect over decades.
Yeah.
The so what here is that a person ultimately loses the ability to distinguish between what they actually feel and what they have been trained to perform feeling.
Oh, wow. Performing feeling.
Yeah. They become a person who simply cannot trust their own fatigue, their own hunger, their own pain, or even their own joy. They feel something, but they constantly need an external permission slip to validate it before they are allowed to act on it.
So if this self-surveillance is happening on an individual level in all of our living rooms and classrooms, we have to look at the master blueprint. Where did this manual come from?
That's a great question.
The text points to a massive historical and cultural divide to explain why it is so deeply ingrained in us to doubt our physical selves. It talks a lot about Western metaphysics.
Right, and whenever we discuss Western metaphysics in this context, we're really talking about the philosophical foundations that shaped modern society. Think of the old Cartesian philosophy.
I think, therefore I am.
Exactly.
That classic line essentially crowned the brain as the absolute sovereign king and treated the body as just, I don't know, the dumb horse carrying the king around.
That's a very vivid way to put it, but it's accurate.
And the text argues that this worldview has a very specific and very gendered structure to it. Just neutrally looking at what the source argues here, it claims that historically, the mind, meaning reason, abstraction, the intellect, has been coded as masculine and objective.
Right.
Meanwhile, the body, the earth, the cyclical, the irrational, the fleshy material stuff has been coded as feminine and inherently suspect.
And when you build an entire culture where disembodied reason is the ruler, and the body is treated as a chaotic problem to be managed or conquered, you invariably devalue the people who are most closely associated with bodily knowledge.
The material consequences of this philosophy are staggering.
They really are.
The text gives specific examples of who pays the price for this. It mentions women, the elderly, indigenous healers, people who work with intuition, midwives. Because of this structural divide, their attunement to the physical world wasn't viewed as a different type of wisdom.
No, it was actively pathologized.
Yeah. The text notes how their deep embodied knowing was systematically labeled hysteria or superstition or just emotional weakness.
Their pain was frequently dismissed as exaggeration. Their cyclical nature was treated as instability. The dominant paradigm demanded objective, measurable proof for everything, which left absolutely no room for somatic intuition.
But the text contrasts this sharply with other historical traditions, specifically mythologies and systems that honored the sacred feminine.
Yes, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, reclaiming somatic autonomy isn't just about individual wellness. According to the text, it's about restoring a cosmological order where matter itself is considered sacred.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the text brings up these incredible archetypes to show that it didn't have to be this way. It mentions the Sumerian goddess Inanna descending through the 7 gates to the underworld, literally stripping away her regal concepts to experience the visceral reality of death and rebirth.
That's a very powerful image.
It is, and it mentions the Hindu goddess Saraswati, who doesn't just hold abstract knowledge, but holds a physical musical instrument, linking wisdom to vibration and sound. And Oshun, the Yoruba deity of the river.
In these traditions, the divine doesn't sit on a sterile cloud completely divorced from the messy physical world. The divine doesn't transcend the physical. It speaks through it.
Wow, speaks through it.
Yeah, it moves through flesh, rhythm, digestion, and sensation. The body isn't some earthly obstacle you have to overcome to reach enlightenment. The body is the actual temple where the enlightenment takes place.
So if claiming the body is historically an act of rebellion, how do we actually do it? Because so far we've been talking about cultural conditioning, which is a very slow generational erosion of somatic autonomy.
Right, it's a gradual process.
But the text also identifies something much faster and much more violent that separates us from our bodies: trauma.
Yes. While cultural conditioning is a slow drip that you barely notice, trauma is a sudden, forceful eviction. The text describes trauma profoundly as an experience of somatic dislodgement.
Somatic dislodgement. When I read that term, I immediately imagined the nervous system essentially pulling a massive fire alarm and forcing an evacuation of the building.
That's a brilliant way to visualize it.
The physical body stays behind to take the hit, but the sensing self-like, the you, escapes out the back door. Is that biologically what's happening?
It is a very accurate way to look at it. When an experience overwhelms the nervous system beyond its immediate capacity to process or fight back, the system forces that evacuation to protect you from the unbearable intensity of the moment.
So it's trying to help.
Exactly. It is an evolutionary feature, not a bug. The physical body continues to exist. It breathes. It walks around. It might even carry the tension and reenact the defensive postures for years, but the conscious self watches from a safe distance.
You're just detached.
Yes. The body stops being a home you occupy. It becomes a hostile terrain that you just have to manage from afar.
It is the ultimate protective mechanism that eventually becomes a prison. And the text emphasizes a point here that I think is crucial for anyone who has ever tried to simply, think their way out of a trauma response or read enough books to cure their anxiety.
Right, which never works.
It doesn't. The text states bluntly, the body does not respond to argument.
You cannot logic a dysregulated nervous system into feeling safe. Your frontal lobe might completely understand that the situation is objectively safe now. You might have the best therapist in the world and a flawless intellectual grasp of your own history.
But it's not enough.
No. The deep, primitive parts of your brain and your nervous system require something else entirely. They require repeated, lived, physical experiences where the expected violation or danger does not arrive. They need tangible physiological evidence to recalibrate.
Which brings us to the most practical tool the text offers for this recalibration. If logic doesn't work, what does?
The breath.
The breath. The text refers to the breath as a sovereignty marker, and it points out that breath is politically and biologically significant because it is the only autonomic function we can voluntarily alter at a moment's notice.
That's the crucial distinction.
Yeah, you can't just decide to slow your digestion down or, command your kidneys to filter faster. But breath sits right there on the borderland between what your body does on autopilot and what you can manually control.
It is the ultimate threshold phenomenon. The breath is always running in the background to keep you alive, but at any second, you can step in, grab the steering wheel, and change the destination.
The examples the text gives of how we surrender that steering wheel are almost uncomfortable to read because they are so relatable.
Oh, completely.
Think about how unconsciously we alter our breath around authority figures. The text points out how most people subtly shorten or even hold their breath during a medical exam.
People do it all the time without realizing it.
Or, and this one really made me evaluate my own life, how you might unconsciously match the breathing pattern of someone whose approval you crave, or someone who is angry just to keep the peace in the room.
It is a profound form of somatic social mirroring. It is a fawn response. By matching their erratic or shallow breath, you are literally surrendering your own internal biological rhythm to appease someone else's nervous system.
Wait, really? Just by changing how we breathe?
I was
So when people say to take a deep, low belly breath, it isn't just a generic relaxation technique you do in a yoga studio. Based on this text, taking up space with your breath is actually an assertion of physical presence.
It is.
It's a way of signaling to your own vagus nerve and to the room at large, my body is not on trial here.
It is a biological declaration of independence. When you are accustomed to chronic constriction, pulling breath deep into the belly pushes back against the internalized security guard. It asserts, I am here. My safety does not require my physical shrinking. You are intentionally reclaiming the very instrument through which you speak your existence into reality.
I love that. So let's say you use that deep breath to anchor back into your body. How do you actually navigate the rest of your day? Because somatic autonomy is contested constantly in very mundane ways.
Every single day.
The text highlights 3 everyday battlegrounds where we have to fiercely reclaim our bodies: pleasure, rest, and consent. Let's look at pleasure first.
Suppressing pleasure has historically been a highly effective mechanism of social control. If a culture can make you believe that your positive sensory experiences are somehow inherently bad, that pleasure is indulgent, a distraction, or evidence of moral weakness, then you become completely dependent on external frameworks to validate your worth.
You literally can't trust your own joy.
Exactly.
Every moment of delight is shadowed by this heavy puritanical guilt, like, did I earn this slice of cake, or does taking a hot bath in the middle of the day make me a lazy, bad person?
It's exhausting.
It is. The text brings up the archetype of ocean again to counter this. As the Yoruba deity of sweetness, beauty, and honey, she is also the deity of medicine, wisdom, and divination. The text makes the profound point that sweetness and medicine are not opposing forces.
They're unified in the exact same sacred intelligence. The capacity for deep, resonant knowing and the capacity for pure, unadulterated pleasure share the same physiological root.
That is so countercultural.
It is. Denying yourself pleasure doesn't make you more disciplined or wise. It just leaves you with a desiccated, disconnected form of knowing. To allow delight without immediately apologizing for it is a profound form of sovereignty.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? I really want you to think about your own relationship with the second battleground, rest.
Oh, this is a big one.
It's huge. Do you treat rest as neutral biological maintenance, or do you feel like you have to earn your right to sit on the couch through relentless output? We've gotten to the point in modern society where I literally need my smartwatch to buzz and tell me, hey, your recovery's low and you are stressed, before I give myself permission to actually admit I feel tired.
And that's because, in a system that defines our human value entirely by our economic productivity, rest naturally becomes framed as a failure, or at best a necessary evil just to get you back to work.
Right.
But somatic autonomy demands we view rest as something much simpler, which the text calls an operational report.
That phrasing is brilliant. An operational report. It's exactly like looking at the dashboard of your car. When the fuel light comes on, you don't start crying and say the car lacks discipline.
No, you don't.
You don't say the car is morally bankrupt. You just say, it needs gas. But we almost never treat our own bodies with that same neutral logic.
We really don't. Heaviness in the limbs, slowed cognition, a complete lack of motivation, these are not character flaws. They're not failures of your willpower. They are simply real-time data points from your body about the current state of your available biological resources.
Data points, not judgments.
Exactly. When you feel a deep sense of guilt for resting, it is the clearest indicator that your somatic autonomy has been compromised. Your body has been subordinated to an external framework of justification.
Your body is acting as a servant of output rather than a home you inhabit. If reclaiming rest is how we recover our biological resources, then reclaiming consent, our third battleground, is how we protect a perimeter around them. We talk about consent a lot culturally now, but the text argues we haven't penetrated deep enough into the somatic layer.
There's a massive difference between a true embodied nervous system yes and what the text calls performative consent.
Performative consent.
Yeah. Performative consent occurs when you have been deeply socialized toward compliance. It looks like consent from the outside, but internally, it is entirely hollow. It is saying yes verbally while your nervous system is experiencing a very complicated, stressful mix of not no and I just want this to be over.
Or the classic, maybe if I try hard enough to be okay with this, I will eventually feel it.
Yes. Somatic autonomy requires developing the internal capacity to actually sense the difference between genuine, full-body enthusiasm and the mere performance of enthusiasm designed to avoid conflict. The body always knows the difference.
The tension in your jaw knows.
The pit in your stomach knows.
Yeah.
The question is simply whether you have given yourself the permission to listen to that specific data.
Now, you might be listening to all of this and thinking, okay, the answer is obvious. I need a rigorous spiritual practice. I need to meditate for 2 hours a day or go on a silent healing retreat to reconnect with my body.
But the text offers a massive warning here.
It does. It argues that modern spiritual and wellness frameworks can actually become the final, most sophisticated trap of override.
This phenomenon is known as spiritual bypass.
Spiritual bypass.
Right. It is the use of elevated, transcendence-based frameworks to completely ignore or invalidate what the body is actively signaling.
So, like, discomfort is just your ego acting up.
Exactly.
Or your desire for connection is just unhealthy attachment. Your need for rest is just a lack of spiritual discipline. You take these incredibly high-minded spiritual concepts and weaponize them to gaslight your own nervous system.
It's toxic.
You're ignoring the dashboard lights by putting a very pretty spiritual sticker over them.
It becomes a highly elevated cover story for compliance with conditions that are actually harming you. But the text is careful to distinguish this modern bypass from genuine spiritual transmission.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Authentic traditions, and the text specifically points to tantric lineages, Sufi moving meditations, and Vodou practitioners. They do not seek to annihilate somatic intelligence. They work through the body, not around it.
Because the body is the necessary instrument.
Yes. And as the text vividly notes, a damaged, disconnected instrument cannot carry the signal it was built for.
So the goal isn't to transcend or escape the body, it is to finally inhabit it. The text refers to this journey as the practice of inhabiting. It describes somatic autonomy not as some new skill you acquire, but as a profound unlearning.
You are simply removing the lifelong obstructions that keep your natural capacities from functioning.
Just stripping away the override.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how the text completely redefines success in this practice. The goal of somatic autonomy is not to never feel constricted or anxious again.
Right, because that's impossible.
Constriction will absolutely happen. But constriction is no longer viewed as a failure of your practice. It is simply vital information.
It's your body reporting on what specific conditions, people, or environments are making it feel unsafe.
The practice is returning to the body with genuine curiosity, rather than harsh judgment. It is asking what is actually here, right now, in this body, in this exact moment, without immediately trying to fix it, suppress it, or punish yourself for feeling it.
Wow, this has been such a journey today. We started by looking at how the architecture of override is built into us from our earliest days in infancy.
How we are systematically trained to prioritize external validity over our own sensory data.
Exactly. And we explored the historical philosophy that severed the mind from the body, and how trauma acts as the ultimate eviction notice from our physical homes.
And we grounded all of that in the daily, tangible acts of reclamation, using the conscious breath to pull yourself back into the present.
Refusing to pathologize your own pleasure. Treating your need for rest as a neutral operational report.
And demanding an authentic nervous system, yes, in every matter of consent.
And as the text so beautifully reminds us, somatic autonomy does not promise a life free of suffering. It doesn't mean you will always be perfectly comfortable or endlessly joyful.
No, it doesn't.
What it promises is that your physical experience, the fatigue, the grief, the pleasure, whatever it happens to you on any given day, will finally be your own. It will be yours without needing a permission slip from a doctor, a partner, a boss, or even a spiritual guru.
It is the irreducible, fundamental right to interpret and respond to your own physical interiority.
Which brings us right back to where we started, that potentially uncomfortable question of whether your body truly belongs to you. The text leaves us with a set of closing questions, and I want to leave you, the listener, with one of them to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
It's a great question.
Imagine a single day of full somatic autonomy, a day where every single physical response is genuinely yours, completely free from the cross-examination of your internalized authority. No inner security guards second-guessing your fatigue, policing your joy, or shortening your breath. What would that day actually feel like from the inside?